Hey, gang. Now that one tank is emptied and the other is refilled, let's continue with part two. Are you hearing a delay?
Yes, a little bit. Every now and then you cut out and come back. It's not significant enough that it interferes with my understanding what you're saying, but our connection seems to be strange.
Yeah. Um, I'm gonna have to see if it's here or the video is always foggy when I
Really?
see you now. Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. It's always been.
You're
Um, but
kidding.
then, but then when it uploads to the internet and I download it to do the editing, you're clear as a bell.
Wow. Well,
And
you've been fuzzy in and out today. Yeah.
yeah, I knew that, and they tell you that the quality is better than what you're seeing.
Okay.
Um, where was I going with that? But I'm wondering if there's also an issue this time with the audio as well. That like um, that closing. We kind of tripped over each other. And
We
last
do
week,
that all the
do you
time.
know we didn't do that when
We
we
do that
went
all the time.
into from the first episode into the second one.
Now
Yeah,
you're getting
we
weird.
never said I'm James Earl and I'm Nergs.
No,
Okay, what was
we
that?
never do.
Yeah,
It got
we didn't.
weird.
I,
You're
well, yeah,
weird now.
oh, the video.
Video and the audio. Yeah.
Oh,
I mean,
wow. Okay.
I'm
Uh,
hearing myself just fine, but you're real blurry and you're kind of cutting in and out now and then.
okay. All right. So you had said we are close to our time or whatever you had pointed out, and I said, yeah, we're at 34 minutes. And I'm
Oh.
like, okay, well, here it comes. I'm Jane Stahl, and okay, I'll stop it after that, and that never happened. And we go right into the next topic in the next episode. I'm like, where in the hell am I going to cut this? I
we have to
after into it,
we have to
list
be better.
literally about four times. I went back through and decided the right spot four times.
Oh
Um,
no.
I put that same, and in fact, I think last week I told you about it. The clips that
Hmm.
I created for,
Yeah.
I said, we've done it again. We've done and talked through the episode yet. So
Yeah.
for when we continue to the next, like we're doing today, um, I found a spot for that. And
Good.
then, of course, I just, instead of the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 countdown, it goes
Hmm.
right into like there's a cup of coffee and it's
Yeah.
me
Yeah.
again. And I say, now that tanks are emptied or some of the time to fill in or whatever, I don't know. Here, let's continue. Uh,
Hmm. Yeah.
yeah, last
Whatever.
week I had no idea where to put it. Yeah.
Well, what was it? Where last week I was at the studio. Is that right? Was that last week?
That was Phil Rep. That was last weekend because that was Phil Repco.
That was
Last
so
week
much
you,
fun. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. He's a bright guy. I always
Oh
knew
yeah.
that. Um, you scared me when you said that that he didn't like Hillary. I'm like, oh God, here.
Well,
If you don't like
I
Hillary for one reason or another, that's fine.
mhm.
But realize. Oh, excuse me. Realize the what your options are, and I think that's something that's happening right now. And he made a great
Mm.
point. You still see people that are on the Trump train, but we've been seeing people get off. You don't see new people getting on.
People get on. Yeah, that's true. Mm.
And I've been saying that. Not in those words, but I've been saying that.
Right. That's true. That is true. That is true.
But
Okay.
so happiness.
So, feeling good, the
Yeah.
new mood therapy. In the first of maybe one or maybe a half a dozen episodes where we are looking at understanding happiness or understanding why we're not are understanding how to, be more effective people in our lives and worlds today. And there have been a number of important I shouldn't say it that way. There have been a number of things I have read, or a number of people with whom I've become acquainted throughout particularly my teaching career, that have helped me understand human beings a little bit better and life a little bit better, and being able and were able, I think, in my career sometimes to make life a little bit more understandable and palatable to a number of students. So, I bring to our sessions some of the things that have impacted in my understanding about life and understanding how better to live it. How's that?
Yeah.
Anyway, so decades ago, and again, in our upcoming series, however many episodes it tends to be, there are a number of writers whom I will bring to our audience's attention that have influenced me to some degree. And decades ago, this book, and I just need to take a look at really briefly when it was published, because it's been quite a while. The pages are yellow. So it's, not a brand new book. It was published in 1980, okay, by David Burns. And again, he's an MD, and the book is Feeling Good, the New Mood Therapy. But what he does in there is remind us that our feelings aren't facts. And like I said in our previous episode, one of the things I tried to do with my students was to remind them that just because they get up in the morning and are feeling crappy doesn't mean that they have to feel crappy the rest of the day. What they can do, and I read once where it's in the first 30 seconds upon waking, you decide who you're going to be in any particular day. But even if you wake up and you're feeling kind of crappy, doesn't mean you have to be feeling crappy the rest of the day. If you do something healthful, mentally, physically, diet-wise, you can change your feelings, because feelings aren't facts. Feelings follow actions. So act in some healthful way and guarantees your feelings will change. But nonetheless, he also talks about how our feelings are so determined by how we think about things. There you go.
As you know, not to interrupt, but as
Mhm.
you know, I do. I need to actually get back to this for the expression too.
Yes.
Occasionally write on inspiring and celebrities or business people or whoever that have influenced me by one of their quotes. And a guy by the name of Damon John, who is the founder of the clothing brand called FUBU, and is another entrepreneur and in one of the investors on the TV show The Shark Tank,
Love that show.
says, "You're not stuck where you are unless you decide to be."
Very good.
And as soon as you said about waking up and deciding what your day is going to be like, I thought, yep, I know the perfect quote.
There you go. Anyway, David Burns talks about how we think, and basically our perspective, perhaps you can phrase it that way, but how we think determines our feelings. And he identifies 10 cognitive distortions that create problems in obviously in our thinking, but also in our feeling, and then how we go about making decisions for our lives. And I thought it might be helpful just to go through those 10 cognitive distortions. And there's a quiz at the end, not that necessarily we will take it, although we could. There's a
But
quiz
I
at
was
the
going to
end
say,
giving certain scenarios. Pardon me?
I'm going to create some show notes.
Oh, okay.
That's not what I wanted
There
to
you
do.
go. So as you're creating your show notes, the first cognitive distortion is called all or nothing thinking. You see things in black and white categories, and if your performance falls short of perfect, you see yourself as a total failure. And I am aware these days of certain conversations in which people say, okay, now which is it? Yes or no? Demanding that it be one or the other. It can't be both, or it can't be anywhere in between. And what those folks are trying to do to the people with whom they're talking is placing them in this all or nothing thinking, this cognitive distortion. So, as we are able, when people come at us or when we come at ourselves and thinking, oh my God, I didn't do that 100% correct, we can't get into the distortion of thinking that you're a total failure. I mean, what is the quote that says, the trying to be perfect is the destructor of joy? Being comparative thinking is the destroyer of joy. And people urge you not to let perfection get in the way of being good.
Yeah.
As it sometimes does. So that's one. So the second one is labeled overgeneralization. You see a single negative event as a never-ending pattern of defeat. So you don't succeed at water skiing on the first try, and you think, well, I just can't do this. This is not what I am able to do. Instead of seeing it as practice, as seeing it as, I mean, and there are all the stories of, how many times did Edison try to invent the light bulb and failed, and
Right.
so many of us give up way too soon. So
I
that's
have
overgeneralization.
another quote.
Go ahead.
Pull it up. I can give it to you. Nelson Mandela.
Okay.
So
One of my heroes. Yep.
he never loses. He either wins or learns.
There you go. Oh, that's
That's
beautiful.
very similar to Edison saying it was never a failure. I just know won't work. Was
Right.
with his comments with regards to the light bulb when he was looking for a filament.
There you go. There you go. Number 3 is mental filter. You pick out a single negative detail and dwell on it exclusively so that your vision of all reality becomes darkened, like the drop of ink that discolors the entire beaker of water. And isn't that so common that we allow one single event, whatever it is, in a relationship, in a job, in a hobby even, we allow one single thing to say that's the whole of it. Number 4, disqualifying the positive. You reject positive experiences by insisting they don't count for some sort of reason or another. And you hold on to this negative belief that is contradicted by your everyday experiences. Like you succeed one time and say, well, that was only one time. That doesn't mean I can do it over and over and over again. Or, I mean, so positive, so familiar are, people's compliments. What do we hear more? The single negative thing that people will say about us. And that's a generalization, I suppose, that I have learned over the years, that 10 people can say, oh my God, what a great job you did. But what do you concentrate on? The single negative feedback that you get. Now, granted, that's where the learning happens, but still it influences our feelings. We are hurt by that single negative thing as opposed to paying attention to the many more positive things that are said.
Right.
That I find really typical.
Number 5 sounds like the. I was just to say that also sounds like the negative Nancy. It doesn't matter what happens. You're the negative Nancy, as it's called. who
Yeah.
just has something bad to say.
Or, one of my favorites you know, is the inability to experience joy because it won't last forever. Therefore, in order to protect myself from disappointment, I will expect the bad to happen. I can't
Yeah,
really
that's
appreciate
crazy.
this. Yeah, you said it.
That's crazy.
Number next, jumping to conclusions. You make a negative interpretation, even though there are no definite facts that convincingly support your conclusion. And jumping to conclusions has two examples here. Number one is mind reading. You arbitrarily conclude that someone is reacting negatively to you and you don't bother to check this out. This one drives me crazy. When I recognize that someone is reading my intentions, that I will do something or say something, and another person will say, well, that's because you think this, or that's because you have this intention. That drives me nuts. That is a super trigger for me. Please don't read my intentions. Okay. Ask me why I did a
Yeah.
certain thing or why I said a certain thing. Don't assume that I mean, there's part projection in there, that people assume you do a thing or think a thing or feel a thing because they do. That's how they would react. I'm not you. Ask
Yeah.
me. Don't read my mind. Honestly, that's one of my hugest triggers that have created arguments among people I care about.
Politics. Yeah, I was going to say politics.
Yeah,
Oh, it's Joe Biden. He's a libtard.
exactly. Yeah.
What
And
does
he
he stand
must,
on?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
He must be behaving this way because he is this. No, please ask me. Ask me to explain. Don't assume you know what I'm thinking. The second one is the fortune teller error. This comes again under jumping to conclusions. In the fortune teller error, you anticipate that things will turn out badly and you feel convinced that your prediction is an already established fact. That's jumping to conclusions. Number 6 is a favorite: magnification or catastrophizing, or its opposite, minimization. You exaggerate the importance of things just as you goof up or someone else's achievement, or you inappropriately shrink things until they appear tiny. Again, your own desirable qualities or the other fellow's imperfections. This is also called the binocular trick. So again, we are seeing things incorrectly. Number 7, a favorite: emotional reasoning. You assume that your negative emotions necessarily reflect the way things really are. Because I feel this way, therefore it must be true. And once again, feelings aren't facts. Number 8, a favorite of many folks: should statements. You try to motivate yourself with shoulds and shouldn'ts, as if you had to be whipped and punished before you could be expected to do anything. Musts and oughts are also offenders. The emotional consequence is guilt. When you direct should statements toward others, you feel anger, frustration, and resentment. Those are the shoulds. And there's some kind of a poem that says you should eliminate the shoulds and the coulds and the oughts and the musts because of the shame and guilt that they engender in oneself or in other people. So I have a problem, not a problem necessarily, but when people do things, wonderful things, it's hard for me to say I'm so proud of you because it seems so manipulative. Who am I? What does my pride matter? And so I typically say I'm happy for you rather than I'm proud of you, because that assumes I have something to do, that you would count my opinion as something worth something, which it isn't. I'm happy for you when you do wonderful things. Okay.
Yeah, but I
Labeling
don't know. I
and
think
go
you're discounting
ahead.
yourself, though. I think you're
What was
discounting
that?
yourself, though. I think that you're
Well,
discounting yourself to a degree.
one can
Like,
see it
especially
that way, but I don't feel discounted. So therefore,
yeah.
I
Well,
mean,
yeah. Okay.
yeah, I don't feel discounted. I just don't want to, I don't want to add to anybody's, what do you say, dependence on other people's opinion. Uh, I don't want, I don't want
More than
people's
social media
opinion of
has done already.
themselves. Yeah, I don't want people's opinions of themselves to be dependent on somebody else. They need to go inside themselves and figure out who you are, rather than look at other people and say, who am I? What should I be? Am I okay today? Are you proud of me? And does that make me an okay person? Your opinion of me? No, it needs to come from inside. So mm, that's where all that static comes from in my world. Number 9 is labeling and mislabeling. And David Byrne says this is an extreme form of over exaggeration. Instead of describing your error, you attach a negative label to yourself. I'm a loser. When someone else's behavior rubs you the wrong way, you attach a negative label to him. He's a goddamn louse. Mislabeling involves describing an event with language that is highly colored and emotionally loaded. So, you know, with that one, we've been encouraged to say, no, you're not. You have lost this event. That doesn't mean you, as a person, are a loser. It's that you have not succeeded in this particular event or in this particular something. So we're not labeling the person, but just acknowledging the event or something or behavior, not the person. And the last one is personalization. This is a favorite, and it drives me crazy too. You see yourself as the cause of some negative external event, which in fact you were not primarily responsible for. And you apologize incessantly because something happened, as if you had anything to do with it. But feeling that one is responsible for something that happens is a real cause of feeling lousy. If you feel responsible for everything bad that happens to the universe or everything bad that happens to another person, over personalization is the problem, is the cognitive distortion here. Okay, so those are the 10. 10. How do you think? What do you think?
Yeah. And that's so. What does he say, if anything? For
And I may
example,
not be able to answer this. It's been decades since I read the book. Go ahead.
and that's okay. I mean, maybe, but this is kind of I'm sure we can ask a question like this for all 10, but like with mislabeling and labeling, and you had said, oh, that guy's a louse, or
Mm-hmm.
he's lazy, or something. What if it's really true? What if he
Is
really is a bad president?
then we have to examine this. I mean, what we should do is say, my conclusion is that he's a bad president because he acted this way. He said this, and those were bad things that he did and bad things that he said, which perhaps do not contribute to the well-being of the country or the well-being of a relationship or the well-being of something.
Yeah.
That you're suggesting we shouldn't be able to judge a thing. But I think that we need to come up with rubrics, perhaps, that help us to define what a good president is, what a good
Right.
president does, what a good president says. And I think that people need to establish that. For example, and you had mentioned this in a previous episode, probably, that, there are many evangelicals who count themselves as good Christians, but they've forgotten the rubric of what makes them that. Do you know? And so to call themselves good Christians, or to call themselves Christians at all, when they behave in this particular way, this is not, doesn't fit, doesn't
Right.
work. If you're going to label yourself as this, then this is how you have to behave. This is how you have to, these are the kinds of things you say, and these are the kinds of things you don't do. And these are the kinds of things you don't say. And when you do not match that, so there's a reason to be able to do that. And so in another episode, perhaps we will give those virtues, maybe that Benjamin Franklin listed in his own. Did we talk about that? No. Yes. So
You introduced it.
in the
Yeah.
previous episode, yes.
Yeah.
One of the things I want to go back and research is Benjamin Franklin back in the day. Not that by any means is he a saint, and by any means does he admit to being a saint. He's not. But he at one time developed a list of virtues, and he made himself a chart and said, okay, I'm going to practice this virtue. I forget how long, maybe a day, maybe a week, I don't know, but he had a chart. And he failed in his chart all the time, but he had, 10 virtues. And maybe we will look at those as the kinds of rubrics I'm talking about that make you a good person, and that make your relationships and your behaviors better for the health of your relationships, or better for the health of the country, if we're talking about presidents. So there.
But
Okay.
isn't that isn't that an example of both his failure in the virtues? Isn't that, shouldn't we just be looking at the fact that, hey, you know what, you tried, as opposed
As
to the
examples to
overgeneralization?
learn. Yes. Yes.
But as the
Yes.
overgeneralization, he accomplished all these virtues, but he didn't do these two. Now he's a
Yes.
failure.
Yes.
You
And
got
he
the
didn't
other
do them
eight.
every single time. Yes. Yes. He
Yeah.
was learning. Yeah. I think Benjamin Franklin had a pretty good opinion of himself and was able to not go to catastrophizing or minimizing, it seems to me.
Have you ever seen one of my favorite actors? I think we talked about him for some reason. I think because of when he was in Howard Stern's movie Private Parts. One of my favorite kind of character actor, but definitely great at what he does, is an actor named Paul Giamatti.
Okay. Yes. Okay.
He was in Private Parts. He played Pig Vomit, the program director at WNBC in New York.
Okay.
Uh, he was actually, and you'd have to really see it. You wouldn't have known it unless you know who he is. He was actually one of the apes in the Mark Wahlberg Planet of the Apes revamp.
Oh my God.
He was also in the movie Sideways.
Okay.
You've seen that one. But when I think one of his best roles, in addition to Private Parts, was as John Adams in the HBO miniseries John Adams, and he was
Okay.
the lead in that. And that's why I wasn't going to say, well, he's not a leading actor. He was, and he did an amazing job at it.
Mm-hmm.
The actor, I'm brain farting on his name. I know who he is. He played the mob boss in the Christian Bale Batman movies. He
Okay.
was also in uh, the Little Hotel or something, the Little Something Hotel, or the one with Judi Dench and all the older people. The one dies, and that
I'm sorry.
uh,
I don't know.
he was
Hmm.
one of the love interests in that movie.
Hmm.
He did an excellent job at playing Benjamin Franklin
Oh. Okay.
in the
Okay.
Sam Adams series, or I'm
Okay.
sorry, in the John
Okay.
Adams series.
Yeah. 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 We'll have to go back and take a look at that. Anyway, I don't
Yeah.
know where we are in terms of time, but I wondered if you wanted to. David Burns gives some hypotheticals here. And I was wondering if you wanted to see if you could identify since you're taking episode notes, if you want to try to identify the cognitive distortions in these scenarios. Want to give it a shot?
Okay. Let me use my vertical screen, and that way I can expand my 2 pages here into one big document. There we go.
Are you ready?
Yeah, I don't know if you can see that. There it is over there.
There you go.
On my portrait, my vertical monitor. Let's see what we can do here.
All right, now you're going to pretend you're a housewife, and your heart sinks when your husband has just complained disgruntledly that the roast beef was overdone. The following thought crosses your mind: I'm a total failure. I can't stand it. I never do anything right. I work like a slave. And this is all the thanks I get. The jerk. Those thoughts cause you to feel sad and angry. Your distortions include one or more of the following: all or nothing thinking, overgeneralization, magnification, labeling, or all of the above.
I'm thinking of it. It's the one with, there's X number of positives, like we just talked about, but it's the
Yes.
one negative that you focus on. All or nothing thinking.
And actually, David Burns suggests that all of those cognitive distortions are in that particular example. And he goes on to explain it this way. He says, now I will discuss the correct answers. Any answer you might have circled was correct. If you circled anything, you were right. And here's why. When you tell yourself, I'm a total failure, you engage in all or nothing thinking.
Right.
Cut it out. The meat was a little dry, but that doesn't make your entire life a total failure. When you think, I never do anything right, you are overgeneralizing. Never? Come on now. Not anything? When you tell yourself, I can't stand it, you are magnifying the pain you are feeling. You're blowing it way out of proportion because you are standing it. And if you are standing it, you can stand it. Your husband's grumbling is not exactly what you like to hear, but it's not a reflection of your worth. And finally, when you proclaim, I work like a slave, and this is all the thanks I get, the jerk, you're labeling both of you. He's not a jerk. He's just being irritable and insensitive. Jerky behavior exists, but jerks do not. Similarly, it's silly to label yourself a slave. You're just letting his moodiness sour your evening. So there.
Yeah.
So anyway, he gives a number of, I don't know that we want to go through them, but he gives a number of scenarios and quizzes people on in the book, and quizzes people about what cognitive distortions there are. So we might want to, just start thinking about, when we're feeling crappy, we might start thinking about what cognitive distortions may be in play, and it may help. It may help to eliminate their power. How's that?
I'm going to see if I can not limit. No, that's not what I want to. What is shrink the size, and maybe edit out some of the examples or information.
Okay.
So I can put it all on one page.
And make it the graphic.
And then create a graphic out of it, and like put this into my inspirational folder where all the quotes are.
There you go.
And put the 10 you ought not or the 10 you shouldn'ts.
Now, while you're trying to do that, if anyone is interested in his book, there are other chapters. There are practical applications. There's a practical application chapter that includes start by building your self-esteem. and how to talk back to yourself, and ways of defeating guilt. Part 3 is labeled realistic depressions. There's and the only thing that's mentioned in there is that sadness is not depression. There's a difference between the two.
Is that
Part
is that
4,
all practical application?
no, practical applications. That is part 2. Start by building your self-esteem.
Okay,
How to
and then what was
beat
next?
nothingism. Part 3 is realistic depressions. Sadness is not depression. There's a difference between being sad and being depressed. Part 4 is prevention and personal growth. And, this one has a number of chapters. The cause of it all, the cause of the problems. There's the approval addiction, the love addiction. We have to get everybody's approval. We have to get everybody's love. Your work is not your worth. And finally, dare to be average. Ways to overcome perfectionism. That, to me, was an important chapter, important part. And then part 5 is defeating hopelessness and suicide. The ultimate victory, choosing to live. Part 6, coping with the stresses and strains of daily living. In there, he writes about practicing what he preaches. And then part 7 is a really important one, the chemistry of mood. And it's the consumer's guide to antidepressant drug therapy. Now, that section, I would suggest, is probably not as helpful today as it was in 1980, because there's been so much research, there's been so much, much progress, or maybe lack of, I don't know, in the pharmaceutical department. And maybe I can't call it progress. Maybe we should go back to, 1980 in the ways that we address depression. Because there are, our pharmaceutical environment, the pharmaceutical industry has gone crazy with all kinds of drugs that they use to virtually, in many cases, experiment on people. See how this one works. If that one doesn't work, let's try something else. And it's a dangerous game. Yep. So anyway, that's David Burns' book, and perhaps there's something useful in it for our audience today.
Awesome. I think I got everything.
Good. Now, I don't know how long we've been talking here.
Plenty.
But plenty? Okay. So let's wrap up this particular episode and move on to something else next week.
Absolutely.
Meanwhile, I'm Jane Stahl.
And I'm Jurgs.
And this is
Both Sides Now. All right. See you next week, everybody.
Good.